Well, we're back, which is nice to be back. We missed last week. You were in Ottawa for a conference. I was in New York. I was there because I flew into New York and flew back just for the piece we ended up writing. But when I was there, I just wandered the city. Just purely as an anecdote, I'll mention this, Jen, and we'll move on. New York is over the pandemic.
Oh,
The
yeah.
one I keep having these weird moments throughout the pandemic of imagining if a younger version of myself got beamed out of like 2018 and then just pop like right into any random setting during the pandemic and had to figure out what the hell was going on. Like just like Matt from 2019 beaming on the TDC, everyone's in a mask. Like what would 2019 Matt think about that? Like, what? The one thing New York had on that like time traveler from 2019 would be confused about, basically open, everything's fully open. In fact, few masks, almost every couple of blocks on the street corner you have a van for pop-up COVID-19 testing. And it's just something like I noticed one, like I stayed near Times Square and I saw a couple of them and I was like, okay, well, tourist hub, people on arriving flights, so like, that makes sense. They're everywhere. And I don't know if they're private businesses or if they're like a city thing, but that would just be the time travel from 2019 walking up 7th Avenue or 6th Avenue as on later would just be weirded out by the number of vans that say COVID-19 testing. And you'd be like, what's COVID-19?
Don't you wish you could go back and be that person from 2019 again?
It would be pretty incredible. I actually think it would be more interesting to relive early 2020.
Yeah, I think actually, so as you know, I'm writing a book on kind of moral panics and things like that. And the thing that really strikes me is about these really intense periods of high polarization and what I would call a moral panic is the degree to which people just forget about them when they're over.
Oh yeah, there's memory hole for sure.
Yep, they're memory holes.
Well, that was unpleasant. Zoink.
Yep, that's literally what happens, and it's almost like it's almost a biological level response to something that is so disruptive to the collective that the only way to move on from it is to forget it.
I think probably there's a degree of I've had this thought before. I think I've been fairly, I'm fairly emotionally even killed because I have no emotions. Like my emotional range is from like,
you're a sociopath. That's great.
Yeah, I like my emotional range is from like mildly irritated to somewhat content. Like that's basically my sine wave. It's almost a line. So I was pretty even keeled during the pandemic, but a lot of people got weird during the pandemic and probably not in the way they would have expected themselves to get weird. And I don't mean like you weird. No, I mean like you had some anxiety early on. I think that's a completely normal response. I don't think that's weird. I just mean like people you wouldn't expect veering either 100% into you shall comply with the dictates of the state, or you shall be you are not one of the people, you are not among us, or going weirdo full on libertarian. Like I've been like a downtown urban progressive my whole life, and god damn you with these mask mandates. Like people acted in ways that were weird and out of character, and I think the more out of step with your normal self your response was,
the more likely you are to memory hole it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, nobody wants to remember the version of them that emerged at their worst moment.
Or, or maybe I would actually just, yes, but I would phrase it a bit differently. People found out who they were in a crisis and it wasn't who they wanted to be.
Yeah.
Where I found out in a crisis, I'm basically the exact same affectless non-entity I am during a crisis. We actually ended up working out great. It was kind of like, oh, okay, well, here comes a pandemic, or oh, okay, here's a pandemic. Oh, okay, it's over. Like I didn't emote my way through it that much. I mean, I had my moments, I guess, but some people wildly out of character.
Yeah, I don't think I went wildly out of character. I just think my character intensified. And whereas the thing that I became super conscious of was like the restriction of personal freedom and the overarching element of the state being something that I suddenly feared was contributed to my anxiety. And usually like when the thing that broke me during the pandemic is when they shut down the playgrounds and closed the parks. That I don't know what that did to me, but because it was so irrational, and yet at the same time it felt like my world was physically closing in on me and becoming physically claustrophobic on me. That really fucked with me. That messed with my brain. And the only way that I coped with it was was by doing something that Asperger's people generally do, and that was getting super obsessive with my hobbies. Just super, super obsessive with gardening, super, super obsessive with learning how to bake stuff, learning how to, decorate a cake, learning how to sew. Like I sort of delved. I took my obsessive sort of anxiety-ridden nature and I delved into sort of learning skills and hobbies that I thought might be useful, that I'd always wanted to learn. And that sort of kept me more or less okay. But that, especially the first, I would say like 2 or 3 months, where all of a sudden it felt like the physical infrastructure of the world went from being something that was open and free into something that was claustrophobic and restrictive, was something that really, really messed with me.
That's interesting. See, that didn't mess with me. I've joked with my friends that I could, I mean, I think Toronto probably locked down harder than Calgary did. I've joked with my friends, I could go to Mars. Like, hey, Matt, it's going to be a 9-month trip in a tiny cabin. It's going to be really confined and boring, and you'll have nothing to do for 9 months. And I could go, okay. Like, that's something I've learned myself about that. Or I could live on a submarine. Like, I'm actually okay with that. My most bonkers moment of the pandemic was when the Ontario government gave the police those Gestapo powers and closed the golf courses. And it wasn't anxiety, it was rage. And I consciously turned it from hot anger into cold rage, which is better fuel for our line of work. But I'm still angry. Like that changed me. And I don't say this to be dramatic, but like my worldview was changed by that. Like even a year and a half into this thing, I guess it's closer to like 14 months into this thing, there were no adults in control. Like there was, so that's kind of like, that to me was not a traumatic changing of me, but it was like a duly noted change.
Well, and I discovered something about myself in that the way that I cope with those sorts of extreme stress kind of reactions, I have to make things. This is actually the thing that I discovered about myself. I need to make stuff. I need to help co-found the line. I need to sew. I need to bake. I need to like refinish vintage furniture. I literally need to make things. That is just, I think that is just such an intrinsic element of my nature that that's the only way that I can channel the intensity and anxiety of my being into like literally making shit.
You're channeling energy. Like when you have an excess of energy, it has to go somewhere.
It has to go somewhere.
See, for me, what I would do is I would consciously zero it out. Like I would deliberately go, I'm very upset right now, and I'm going to crush these emotions because you humans and your emotions, this is not a good thing. So I would like, when I'm feeling torqued, I consciously zero myself out that way and get back to a calm headspace. But no, I mean, hey,
worked for us, didn't it?
It did, and I also liked the cakes you were baking. I didn't get to eat any, but I've seen.
No, you didn't, and they were beautiful. I got really good at roses, but I hit the point where I was like hit diminishing returns on the cake stuff, because like, you can become a master cake decorator, but how many fucking cakes does an average person need to make? I mean, I kind of got bored with that one, and I shifted over into hobby and sewing. And sewing's great because you can always sew other things.
There's always
sew more stuff. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, this is all interesting, but let's move on to the actual dispatch.
So yeah, okay. One thing just to mention off the top, I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but so I did fly to New York and back last week. I wrote the report about my experience at Pearson and LaGuardia. We did get one note in at the line. I think in general, the piece was very well received. It was widely shared. One of our readers took exception to it, took quite strong exception to it. She had recently been through Pearson and had kind of one of the terrible experiences that we've been hearing about. And she felt that my piece was unfair to people who'd been through that experience. I don't agree with her, but I understand her frustration. Like, I was very clear in the piece. I saw what I saw. I'm going to tell you what I saw, but I don't deny that other things have happened. But anyway, she was kind enough actually to sit down with me on the phone for about 20 minutes. We talked. She also sent me her travel documents, so I was able to confirm, verify what her travel dates and all that stuff. And she told me her experience. So we're going to include in the dispatch this week kind of a counterpoint, I guess, just someone else who landed at Pearson just a few weeks ago recently and had the opposite kind of experience. And I think that's interesting and fair.
It's interesting and totally fair, but also I think the critique is unfair. Like we didn't send you to New York to confirm a pre-existing narrative. We sent you to New York to figure out, okay, what was your experience, and just write about your experience. I think there's a weird thing that people almost expect us to write to confirm their experiences in a weird way. And like, that's not how this works. It's not how it's supposed to work. We're not, you writing about your experience wasn't intended to invalidate anyone else's terrible or excellent experience. That wasn't the purpose of the exercise.
Well, I mean, tell me this is not a lament of the media, the journalists in early 21st century.
Yeah.
Everything we write is either confirming someone's narrative, in which case we're honest, hardworking journalists doing God's work, or it invalidates someone's narrative, in which we're a hack, we're bought and paid for, we're yellow tabloid trash. And
the answer is we're both,
or neither,
at the same time, or neither.
It's no, we live in an era where there are some people out there, God bless them, who will look at reporting and go, this is valuable, thanks.
Yeah.
They're outnumbered. They're outnumbered by the people who will either be going, aha, and Gurney's experience 100% confirms my pre-existing view, or this is not what I experienced and not what I believe, so Gurney is therefore
lying. Yeah.
Well, that's the era we live in. So let's talk about what I think is going to be the primary example of the dispatch. And I
love this idea, by the way. I love this idea.
I had to walk you through it off record at first, and I want the listeners and the viewers to know I can't reveal everything that I just told Jen. So Jen knows stuff that I can't reveal. But I had
an epiphany.
No, not an epiphany, kind of like a spidey tingle, like spidey sense.
Mm-hmm.
And now these are instincts and they're wrong. I don't bat 1,000 on these things, but I had this weird sense earlier this week that I don't know when the next federal election is going to be, but that the Liberals are going to lose. And specifically that when they do lose, we will look back to the last week, maybe 10 days as the beginning of the end. And I'm going to explain why I thought that in a few minutes, but let me tell you something that happened. And this is where the listeners will have to forgive me. I have to be vague here. I got in touch with a friend of mine who is a conservative, a partisan Conservative Party of Canada official. But I trust him because he's not a fire breathing partisan. Like, he works for a party, but he's not brain rotted partisanship. Mm-hmm. And I said, is this the week the Liberals lost? And he said back to me, and this is a few days ago, he said to me, I don't know yet. He goes, I know why you're asking me that, but I don't know that. And then a couple of days later, he came back to me and said, yeah, I think it is. And what we mean by that, Jen, and what I meant by that, the Liberals had a weird 10 days, and none of it was catastrophic. None of it was terrible. They had Marco Mendicino having a lot of criticism, some of it from me and us at the line, but not just us. The Globe is in on it. The Post is in on it. The CBC is writing about it. Mendicino had a bad week. He's being attacked for being dishonest on gun control and the Emergencies Act. Melanie Joly, which our dispatch will discuss in particular, had a bad week too. There was that official from her office who went to the party at the Russian embassy. She denies any knowledge. She throws a staffer under the bus. The next thing you know, she's admitting, okay, my office knew, and then emails are getting leaked showing, yes, they were told. So the staffers in her office are publicly, like off the record, but they're publicly pushing back. Krista Freeland kind of did a twofer this week. She went to the House to talk about the Emergencies Act, was just widely panned for evasive, unhelpful answers. Then at a luncheon in Toronto, I think just yesterday, she gave Thursday, she gave a talk about inflation, and it was nothing. There was a complete nothing burger. All it was a reannouncement of a bunch of existing initiatives. And there's a few other things I can't get into that are off the record, but a few other indicators coming out. Look, 3 years is a long time. God only knows what's going to happen between now and then. Justin Trudeau's
at this point, I don't put bets on what's going to happen in the next 3 weeks.
No, I agree with that. I also think Trudeau is consistently underestimated, and he doesn't want to lose to Pierre Poilievre, and he might stick around, and he's a better campaigner than, to this date, Conservatives have lost to this guy 3 times, and they still underestimate him. Trudeau is better at politics than they give him credit for. Mm-hmm. But something about this week had the feeling to me of this is the tipping point. Yeah. And it's like, this is not the end, but this is the point that years from now we'll look back to and we'll be like, remember that weird 10-day period? Now, there is one of my conservative friends. I was talking with her about this. Well, she pushed back and she said, no. She said, you're overreacting. This is summer silly season. Everybody's fried. Everybody needs to go home. We got to get all the MPs back in their constituencies. They got to see their families, hug their spouses, sleep in a bit, and hit the barbecue circuit. We'll come back in September and things will be fine. Maybe that's what the last 10 days have been. It's an exhausted government operating at high stress levels for 2 years now. Maybe they really do just need a summer break. It just didn't feel that way to me, and I can't prove it. And maybe 3 years from now, I'll be proven wrong.
Well,
but it had the feeling of a government that this is when they hit the point of no return, even if they need 2 or 3 years to get there.
I actually think that this pairs well with a kind of an instinct that I've been having. Again, this is just an instinct, and that is this is going to be the last good summer. Like all of the indicators are coming up bad red. Inflation, interest rate hikes, imminent recession, stock market volatility, potential famine, drag out war. All of the indicators just macroeconomically and on the big picture are coming up beep 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 beep, like everything's going to shit. End of the golden era is now imminent, now in process. And I think that people are going to have a good summer. They're going to be like, fuck it, my credit card is overmaxed, who gives a shit? Let's just have one last good summer. Let's go on vacation. Let's take a much needed break. And then they're going to come back in September and a quarter of the world is going to be hungry. And their credit card debt is now going to be unsustainable because of the interest rate hikes. And all of a sudden, people are going to have to start to come to terms with the fact that the middle class lives they have, in fact, they don't have anymore. And everything's going to get real heading into Christmas, like really bad, real heading into Christmas.
Well,
and
let me tell you one reason that is absolutely true. So this is an Ontario story, and I'm quoting from memory here. I can go find the link after. So Jen, I want to stress to you and the listeners here, don't take this totally verbatim, but I was running errands earlier and I was listening to local news radio in my car and I heard this headline. There's been the price of natural gas is about to go up in Ontario, like 23%. Now it goes up on July 1st. Who cares? Right? Because how much natural gas are you burning in the summer? Okay, you're probably running your clothes dryer, your water heater, and your oven. That first October or November night when you decide I don't want to wake up in a cold house, so we're putting on the furnace overnight, still hot during the day. In Toronto, we have those long extended summers, but it gets cold at night. There's probably going to be another price increase between now and then anyway.
Yep.
So you could be looking at by this winter paying 50% more on your heating every winter, on top of the fact that you're probably already watching your costs on everything have gone up. So I'm a freelancer, right? So I break all my spending down into 20 or 30 categories because some expenses are purely personal, some are purely business, and some are a blend. My cell phone, is that personal or business? Both. So I have to track the cost of all this stuff. My household expenses have gone up about, I think I told you this already. They're up about $700 over the last few months. And this isn't any one item going up.
Yeah, it's
this
everything.
Is 30 items going up, 10, 15, $20.
Yeah. So pair all of that is coming together. So, I mean, I went back and for some reason I'm rereading The Big Short, which is a fantastic book about how the 2008 financial collapse happened.
All the subprime stuff, yeah.
And I felt very compelled to go back to that. And there's a couple of interesting lessons from all that. Firstly, of course, we learned no lessons and we made no serious reforms. And probably the Wall Street is doing exactly the same fucking thing all over again. So we're just as vulnerable as we were back in 2006.
Remember what I said to you a few minutes ago about how the Ford thing is when I realized there were no adults?
Yeah, there are no adults in the room, and there's still and by the way, no adults were put into the room after 2008 either.
Yeah.
So we just continued on, and I think again to some extent, I think 2008 was memory hold. Again, it was memory hold. The other thing that the lesson to go back from 2008 when rereading The Big Short is that people massively underestimate the probability of dramatic change.
Oh yeah, no, of course, normalcy.
And go back, and there's a really great episode or series called what was it? Something Who's Coming to Dinner. It's this episode put out by the BBC where essentially they do they take a middle class family, they put them in like a Victorian sort of London household, and they say, look, this is what your life would have been like in 1961, and then the next day is 1962, and the next day is 1963, and the next day is 1964 and 1965. So it's a 10-day episode, and each episode is broken down into an hour-long thing. So you see what, like, this is what the average family ate in 1962. This is what they were wearing. This is what they would have done in the day. And so it's actually a really fascinating show. It's great. But they went back for their second season and they redid the 1910s. So 1910 to sort of 1919. And like 1913, this family has a servant and is going out on their new bicycles, and they're having picnics in the park with fried chicken. And 1914, which of course, beginning of World War I.
Older brother's been conscripted and he's been blown up in France.
And not only that, but their lifestyle, even if you hadn't personally lost anybody, the lifestyle that from 1914 to 1918 or 1919 just like collapsed. They went from having plenty of food, being perfectly wealthy, to all of a sudden they were trying to figure out how to make ends meet with hay boxes, so that they were essentially heating up a type of crockpot style stew on the oven, and then they were putting it in hay boxes, and then it would cook over the course of the day. Then that would allow them to have a hot meal that they used very little gas in order to produce. And they were eating some kind of weird cardboardy fish cakes in order to get some protein into them. And like this went from a lifestyle that would be enviable to you and I today to a lifestyle that was absolute shite in the course of 18 months. And I think that is a lesson that we have failed to learn. And that is things can dramatically change for the worst. Your lifestyle can collapse like that. And that, I think, is really what a lot of people in this country are headed for. Now, I don't think people in this country are going to starve because we're still pretty rich. But I think a lot of people in slightly less rich countries are going to starve. And I think that we don't have the capacity that we did 3 years ago to deal with what's coming. So, I think things are going to get real dark.
Cutting the Canadian standard of living 30% does not produce famine. It produces resentment and poverty.
Yeah, that's right. Like, you're not going to starve to death, but you might be living on pasta and macaroni and cheese. Like, that's, I think my husband has said it this way, is that a lot of people, especially people in our age bracket, are not prepared for the fact that we are heading into probably the worst 2 years of our lives. We thought the last 2 years were bad. Oh no. So this is just going to be bad in a different way.
It's funny you say mac and cheese and pasta, and I'm sure in the other room my son went,
that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. I want to live on mac and cheese and pasta. But that I would add to your thesis, although it doesn't necessarily, maybe this is beyond a blurb for dispatch blurb, but not only are we in silly season, or not only are they going to have a nice barbecue time, this is going to be their nice last summer. They're going to come back all nice and rested in September, and shit is going to hit the fan. Like, I don't see any, like, I realize I have not all my predictions have been 100%. Nobody's predictions are, but I don't see any way out of September being a good month. I just don't see, from where I'm standing right now, I don't see how things get better in the immediate term.
There's one data point that, okay, first of all, let me devil's advocate counterpoint you here for a minute.
Go for that.
One thing the last 2 years have shown us is that our systems overall are more resilient than we thought. Things bent.
In some ways, yes.
In general, I would say overall, things bent, they didn't work well, they got weird, but society functioned through the pandemic,
function, right? and the grocery stores still had food, and like
the schools pivoted to lousy online. But there is one example that I think actually does speak to your point. So Canada, obviously, it depends on provincial jurisdiction, even local cities. Sometimes we avoided like a Northern Italy health system collapse meltdown throughout the pandemic. The meltdown's now, and that, like,
we just put it off.
Yeah. And it's not going to be sudden, sharp, and dramatic. It's going to be slow, subtle, and prolonged. And
there are no free lunches, man. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs.
I was interviewing for my radio show this week, a doctor at a GTA area hospital. And I just said to him, just ballpark it for me. And we're talking, he says, we don't have a lot of COVID illness right now. What we have is a sick population, like people who have deferred their healthcare for 2 years. Some of them are COVID coming in, some of them not. He goes, we're dealing with maybe double our patient volume with 70% of our pre-pandemic staff. And pre-pandemic staffing, particularly in Ontario, was notoriously insufficient. And right now we're at what we expect to be a low seasonal ebb for COVID, because it's warm weather and there seems to be a strong seasonal component to this. Ontario 5 months from now, when we're in flu season and probably another COVID resurgence season, when doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, everybody are quitting, we're taking early retirement or out themselves on stress leave or out on illness leave. So what I find interesting is how we write a lot about state capacity here at the line, write about institutional issues. No one's talking about this. You touched on this early in the pandemic. One of the pieces you wrote for us, there was never a call for like a mass mobilization. That, like, you know, basically how quickly could Ontario take 20,000 people and convert them into nurses? And how many nurses who are currently nurses could we take and upscale to, I don't know the terminology here, but whatever like the next level up of nursing is. If we wanted to expand the number of nurses in this,
we could have done that over the course of two years.
Probably. We didn't even think about it.
We didn't even think about it.
No. So talk about the 1914, right? Or even 1939. I got the military records of my grandfather, my grandfather's father.
Yeah, how many months did it take to turn ordinary farm boys into soldiers? 1 million of them. We put them in.
My great grandfather was turned into a soldier for the army in the First World War in a matter of months. My grandfather was a wireless air gunner in the Royal Canadian Air Force in the Second World War, and that was a lot more training. So it took about a year.
Well, and they also trained nurses.
Yeah.
They took a lot of volunteer women and turned them into nurses. So,
But we're not even talking about it. Like, our solution is maybe we can lure in more people with immigration. Sure. Let's lure in the nurses of the world and then show them the $1.8 million condo they're going to have to buy if they want to live within 30 miles of the hospital they're working at. Great idea, guys. So anyway, we're full of good cheer.
Good cheer. Excellent. And also you can hear some good cheer coming from downstairs now, can't you?
Uh-oh. Somebody's napping.
Uh-oh. Yes.
You want to pause that for a minute and go deal with
let's pause and I'm going to deal with that.
Back. All right.
Okay, bye.
Okay, we're back. Child emergency largely handled.
You're just going to have to accept that there might be some screaming children in this podcast. That's just what it is.
Mine are older than yours, but it's not like I don't remember.
So look, I mean, there's a couple little blurbs that I was looking at, right? I think that's like, look, the beginning of the death spiral of the Liberals is a good thing to write, although, reports of their death spiral have been exaggerated in the past.
Because I think, because people underestimate Trudeau. He's very good at this.
Yeah, he's very good at this.
You want to do Last Good Summer as a column, though? That's not a blur.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's a column. This is our last good summer. I think that's a very dire, enjoy your summer because things are going to get crappy.
I'll see if I can find that natural gas thing and I'll send that to you.
Totally. So the other two things that were kind of on my list for blurb is that one, the Governor General has been taking a lot of heat for a trip to the Middle East. I believe that the in-flight catering cost something like $93,000.
I think National Defense said it was $80,000. But
$80,000. Yeah. Okay, something like that. And people are predictably outraged. I mean, these sorts of travel scandals always kind of drive me nuts because Canadians are so parochial about stuff like this. Like, look, if you want to make an argument that our Governor General shouldn't be traveling to the Middle East with an entourage, that's a legitimate argument. Like, what is the value of having our GG in the Middle East? I think maybe she's marginal. Maybe she's doing that job so that someone more important doesn't have to. But like, really, what is the value in that to the Canadian taxpayer? I think that's a legitimate argument. But if you are going to sign off on her travel, rightly or wrongly, you have to accept that travel is expensive. I think if she's traveling with an entourage of 29 people, that adds up. It's airport fees, it's disposal fees, it's the food itself, it's getting it, like, it's not cheap to do this stuff. It just isn't. So I think nickel and diming people on things like in-flight catering is kind of silly, although I understand why people get outraged by it because they're like, well, I can't afford to go, eat lobster on a plane. Why? And it's like, literally,
you're not the Governor General.
You're not the Governor General.
Thanks. Next caller.
But like, literally, also, that cost probably paid for some like crappy, cheese and cracker, cold camembert, so to speak. Cheese and cracker. Cheese. Yeah, and a glass of wine. Like this stuff is, that amount of money just doesn't go that far when you have large staffs doing private planes and all the rest. So, and like security expenses is the same thing. I hate it when people lose their minds over security expenses. It's like, you got to give people security. That's just what it is. And this is the cost of doing business. It's just the cost of doing business. But I'm okay with like trashing the idea that why was she doing an entourage to the Middle East? That makes no sense. What is our governor general doing in that role? But I really wish that we would stop nickel and diming these people on silly travel expenses. That's just silly.
Well, here, let me tell you, I pulled up the numbers here. So it was just over $80,000 that covered the meals for 46 people. That is the entourage
46 people
plus flight crew and Gigi's security detail. Let's see.
What is that per person?
Well, that's actually an interesting question. So let me do that, because it was also an 8-day trip. So let's round it off.
Over an 8 days. So it winds up being $1,700
per person
per person over 8 days.
Over 8 days.
So that's $200 a day.
$200 a day to feed people. I don't know if they were flying every day. Like, that's what I don't know.
But I mean, there's other kinds of expenses attached to that. Like there's like disposal fees at airports and all kinds of like just built-in fees. $200 a day is not an unreasonable amount to be feeding. It just isn't. When you're dealing with travel of that nature.
No, I agree with you. Look, I mean, this has been a theme of mine over Vancouver.
Could they have like survived on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Maybe. Is that reasonable for someone at that level traveling on the government dime? No. Moving on.
Well,
it probably actually works out to be something closer to $100 a day in food costs, because and then with the fees, with $100 a fee of worth of sort of logistics fees built into that, that's a pretty I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, that's my rant on that stuff.
This is extremely Canadian, though. This is
so Canadian.
I've written like 6 columns about this over the years. I space them out every couple of years, and the pushback I get when I write these columns is ferocious. People are so angry at me when I write the column that basically amounts to the fact that Canadians are cheap.
Yes, essentially we are exceptionally cheap.
All right, yeah, you do that one.
I'll do that.
You take the heat this time.
I'll take the heat this time. The other one I want to write about is, of course, the Alberta UCP leadership race has kicked off, and the bar that I had set for that race, let me tell you, is not high, and it managed to disappoint right out of the gate. So we started off with an announcement from Danielle Smith, who comes out with a little video that says that her first role in office is going to be to introduce something called the Sovereignty Act, which is going to somehow make the province able to not follow regulations it doesn't want to, somehow. And this might be the dumbest fucking thing I have ever heard in politics. And to me, it's really interesting because, like, I understand the desire to appeal to like sort of a populist base, but to do that requires a very, very fine line. Like, you need to be able to throw stuff to your crazy base while still sounding somewhat plausible. And this to me was like, no, you just came out of the great gate as a cuckoo cuckoo. Welcome to cuckoo cuckoo land, because that is like disqualifyingly idiotic. It's so stupid, I can't even begin.
Let me give you one.
I can't even.
Okay, I defer to you on all matters, Alberta, but let me.
Yes.
Why can't Alberta do what Quebec does?
Alberta could do what Quebec does, but Quebec didn't pass a Sovereignty Act that said that it's just not going to be, like, that's not what Quebec did.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think there's been some interesting buzz this week in different quarters about how Quebec under Premier Francois Legault is getting increasingly, we could politely say, strident on some of his red meat pro Francophone issues. And the constant political paralysis and cowardice among federal liberals and conservatives who will never say a word against this stuff is eroding the charter in ways that we may wake up one day and it just doesn't work anymore.
Effectively, Quebec has separated. Quebec is its own nation at this point.
In almost
all but name. If you were to go and tell the separatists of the 1980s that this is what the relationship between Quebec and the rest of Canada was going to look like by 2022, they would have been thrilled.
You know what? You're right, but I think if you went and told Jean Chrétien in 1995 that this is what it would look like in 2022, he'd probably also be thrilled.
Maybe like maybe this is just the uneasy compromise, but essentially they've separated in all but name, and they managed to keep the money in the transfers.
Works for me.
Does it? Does it? I mean, I think that if you were to do a referendum for the rest of Canada at this point, I'm not sure we would keep Quebec in. Like,
I'd like to see the question.
right? This is the question. So like, yeah, Alberta absolutely could move to a more sovereignty focused relationship within the federation. And in fact, under the UCP, that's exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to talk about getting fair deals passed. They were going to talk about running our own pension plan and running our own police force and doing all these sorts of things, which would turn Alberta into essentially an oligarchy banana republic. But that's beside the point. Yes, it could be a more independent within the Confederation. But you don't just do that by passing a law saying, nah, we're not going to be subject to federal regulations, because that's not how any of this works.
Well, I mean, I guess Smith has signaled what base of the electorate she views as her natural support base. So question, I don't follow the Alberta stuff. Brian Jean is one of the other big candidates right now. What is his natural constituency among the Alberta?
I do think that Smith's gone further to the crazy wing than Jean has, but essentially they're fighting for the same people.
So who current? I mean, I know there's been some speculation about who might join, but of the currently declared, who's the normie?
The normie would be Taves. So Taves would be like and Sawney is probably the other one. So there are some normies in the race. Taves is the one that kind of has the institutional backing of the Kenny people, and to a lesser extent some of the former Harper people that are playing in this game. When I say Taves, I keep wanting to say Vic Taves, but
it's the other. Yeah.
No, it's the other Taves. So anyway, but I mean, the problem that a lot of the normies have, and I mean, Jean and Smith also have, is that like none of these people aren't going to win against Notley. Notley is out fundraising the UCP by dramatic numbers, and she's more likable. She has more name recognition, and people are not happy with the UCP. So like,
you think so? You think it's doomed?
I don't think it's doomed. I think the UCP can pull it out. I just don't see like Danielle Smith versus Rachel Notley. Do we really believe that that's gonna go the UCP's way? Even Brian Jean. I mean, Brian Jean, I think is one of those people who people don't give enough credit for. I think he's actually a much more able organizer and politician than people realize. But like, Brian Jean versus Rachel Notley, really? Because we tried that in 2015, and
if I recall, Notley won that one.
Yeah, Notley won that one. Yeah, dramatically. And then you've got like people like Taves and Sawney, who frankly have no name recognition despite being in Kenny's cabinet. Like they're non-entities. Now that gives them an opportunity to define themselves. But you know, where have you been the last 2 years? You know, like I haven't seen hide nor hair of any of these people. I wouldn't know them by face. So anyway, there has been some chatter that Michelle Rempel is considering jumping in the race. I think that would make it much more interesting. I will note that she managed to dominate the national news cycle simply by making a non-announcement, and in the process completely killing the thunder of both Jean and Smith, which is very funny to me. But mostly I would just like to write a little dispatch pointing out that the Sovereignty Act is stupid. It's just really dumb.
We can do the deep dive in Alberta after the actual participants in the race have actually finalized. But for now, sure. Again, I don't cover this stuff well enough to know. I like to stay in touch with Alberta politics because your politics are interesting. You guys generate a lot of light for a province with half the GTA's population.
Yeah, and this is actually something that Albertans themselves don't really understand. Part of the reason why we can't do what Quebec did is because we had a fraction of the population and no leverage. I'm sorry if you don't understand this. You're a population of 4 million people. It's very small.
From where I sit right now, draw a circle with a radius of 100 kilometers in any direction around me. Okay, you get a whole bunch of Lake Ontario in that, but not including aquatic life. You've got double the people in all of Alberta, and we're half the Ontario population, right? Like I've said this before. I think I told you this before. Albertans sometimes
we forget. We think we're way more important than we actually are. And part of the fact that the reason why is because frankly, the national media pays way more attention to our crazy politics than our population size would dictate. Also because we're just fun. We're fun. We're interesting. But don't mistake that for actual power or leverage. It's not the same thing. We don't have a lot of it within Confederation, and that's just what it is.
Okay. Well, we got a lot to talk about. So I will do the not writing the Liberals off, but just kind of saying 3 years from now, maybe like if 3 years from now, if we're doing an autopsy on where it went wrong, this week would probably be a good place to start. So we can do the line 3 years from now solid by getting a draft of that autopsy written now. I've already done the airline one. We've got a blurb coming in on Jolie's terrible week. You are going to do Governor General travel, stop being so cheap. You were going to do the Alberta thing. Also on my list, the last item on the list, and this is something you were interested in. This touches on a little bit where I was talking about the Liberals' mandates. Travel mandates are changing in Canada. Do you want to say anything about that, or do we have enough?
I feel like we've got so much, and if anything, I would just wrap that into the liberal death spiral thing, just as a line or two. Now that I'm thinking about it,
what they're doing is what I described to you as a fighting withdrawal. They've decided these are not politically sustainable positions, but for political reasons, they just can't say so. They can't do a best summer ever. They can't declare open for business. They've got to do, all right, we're going to let you not do this, but you really shouldn't do it. We don't want you to do the thing we're now going to let you to do. For political reasons, they can't just say the mandates have outlived their purposes. So, okay. Yep. I'll fold that into Liberals and future. Okay. That's all I got. So, and I guess now all the listeners and viewers know too, I'm busy tonight. I don't think I'm going to be done this thing until tomorrow.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Yep. That's all right. I was going to punch out mine this afternoon. I've got a PNP panel at 4, but other than that, I can just sort of pop it in the system and then we can send it out on Saturday.
I'll put my airline blurb in the system now. I'll put the Jolie blurb in the system now, and I will get to Liberal Death Spiral probably. Honestly, it's my son's birthday party. It's not his birthday, but he's having his party this weekend.
Okay.
So I'm going to have
cool.
19 7-year-olds at my house. I'm not going to do much writing.
Lucky you. Why don't we do that? Why don't we just post the podcast here early then?
Yep. No, we can get the video and the podcast up and we'll get the dispatch out tomorrow.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.